So at this point, I've cured both base plates, 2 minutes in the curing unit. I've removed them and we placed them in upside down for 30 seconds. I've also boiled off the wax, the block-out wax from the models, and possibly any wax residue from the base plate, so they're absolutely clean. So you can assess the stability of your base plate. Nothing should be rocking when you're trying to tip it from one way to the other. It's flush right up against the model. There's absolutely no gaps. You have ample relief around the frenums, which we're gonna go back and trim a little bit more. And same thing on the lower. Once more, as a reminder, you wanna make sure that your base plate, like your base plate, comes over the Richard molded pad completely, and eventually we're gonna start filling in the vestibule here with wax right around this area and around the undercut. So when I pried these off the models, they came out rather easily. It's a nice passive fit with no interference as I'm pulling this off the cast. So there's no damage to my master cast whatsoever. And same thing on the upper. This comes off rather easily, very passive, but well adapted and stable. So from this point on, obviously I've boiled off the wax, and I'm gonna do some preliminary trimming on these base plates just to smooth them out a little bit. As careful as I was before, there's still some roughness around the periphery, and we need to get rid of that. So you can certainly use your lathe like we did for the custom tray, or you can use a handpiece like I have here with a small tapered burr. Okay?
Can you guys please watch when Bill's demoing? You're not going to see this again unless you watch the video, but watch how it's actually.
Thanks, Tyler. You're on the video now. You're a superstar. CC. I don't want to trim the underside of this because I'm going to adjust the fit of it. I want it trimmed right at the edge and over, and just round that off. Just the edge, so it feels smooth to the touch. And it's very minimal, blurry. And it's minimal trimming. I'm not really trimming, I'm more rounding off more than anything. So that's why I think if you take the time to be a little accurate when cutting the material back, you won't find yourself wasting a lot of time trying to trim it. Back here, it's right at the vibrating line. Maybe I'm just gonna even it out a little bit and taper it from the top. I'm going to place my cutoff disc in here that I prepared before. And I'm just going to open up the frenums. Not really open them, but more rounding them off more than anything. Make sure you follow the angle of the frenum with your disc. And you want to round it off all the way around. On the outside, as well as a little bit on the inside. Just be careful not to touch the pallet. If you think you're getting too close with a big disc, use a smaller disc or use a very small, tiny tapered burr. And just a little bit on the inside. This one, I have a little more access with it. It's a little easier, whereas this one is a little bit tighter. So I'm just going to go back and clean this up. With with my blade. Just kind of scrape it a little bit. So I think that's as much as I want to do with that. If I maybe perhaps forgot to thin this area out, you can certainly use your handpiece with a small burr and trim this thin now. Okay? Do not trim it on the cast, because if you perforate through the base plate, you're going to damage your cast. Always do it off the model. I'll do the same thing on the lower. So go back to my tapered burr. Very little over the retromolar pad. If you didn't block out your case sufficiently, you can certainly reduce some of the undercuts that might interfere or possibly damage the model at this point. And just make sure everything is nice and rounded. And finish off with our cutoff disc. And just open up the frenums one more time. Again, follow the direction of the frenum. Round it off on the inside edge as well as on the outside edge here. This is pretty straight up and down. Round it off on the outside as well as a little bit on the inside. Use a smaller burr if your disc happens to be too big. And I'll turn it over here so I can get a better view. And I'm using the foot control, and I have a variable speed so I can adjust the amount of speed that I like to have for each particular section, and of course the amount of pressure that you put on with your burrs makes a big difference. More pressure, faster the speed, the faster it will cut. So if you want to take off a little bit and just only maybe just round off one little area, you can do that easily if you're using your foot control, so you never have to take your hands off the case. So from this point on, I'm just going to spray both cases with some Biotex or Biosurf just to get some of the dust residue and some of the oils off the base plate. Rinse them. Just going to air dry them. And we want to have a final assessment on the master casts before we apply any wax. As you can see, everything should fit there nicely. No gaps, especially back here. No gaps, with the exception where we leave the model with our block out. The edge of the base is all the way down to the vestibule, but short of the land area where it allows us to flow wax in there. And you'll see that in the next video and how we finish that. And I have ample room around the frenal attachment. So if I just go back and outline that again, there's one, there's two, and three. So when I place this over, I have ample relief that allows wax to flow in there and relieve the wax as well. So on the lower, should fit in there nicely. No rocking left to right or front to back or anteriorly posteriorly. and I have ample room all around the vestibule, facial and lingual, to add my wax. So before we add wax to these, you can do a number of two ways. You can separate the model with some separator, or what I like to do is soak the models for about 4 or 5 minutes with water and then apply wax, and you don't have the risk of wax sticking onto your cast. If you apply separator, you're going to have a residue of separator on the underside of the wax after you take it off the model to finalize it. So I like the water, soaking it in water technique versus using separator. It's a lot cleaner.